Be warned, the following episode contains spoilers. But fear not, for those spoilers will come after a spoiler warning. Welcome one, welcome all, welcome to another exciting episode of Tales of Citizens right here on the Sound Strategy Network in association with the Legacy Gaming Community, LegacyGG.com. I am Bridger, and I am here today to talk to you about Star Wars. No, Star Citizen. Well, both, a little bit, sort of, kind of. We're here to ask the deep questions about Star Citizen in this Star Citizen podcast, but as, well, we're still waiting on some more stuff to come out, we are going to transition into a little bit of an interesting discussion about Star Wars. But before we go there, we are going to talk about the recent live stream and some of the cool things that happened in there, because there are some cool things to talk about. Before we go there, we're going to talk to my good friend Gray, my co-host. Welcome, sir.
Hey, Bridger, how's it going?
Not bad, not bad, especially because Star Wars didn't turn out to be bad. And that
It wasn't bad.
That is good. And we'll talk more about that later. But let's start by our life in the verse.
Seriously, fair warning. There will be spoilers after we say spoilers. We'll give you a little time to turn off your podcast, scramble for your play button.
Although, to be fair, if you haven't seen it yet...
Don't let us spoil this for you.
If you haven't seen it yet, it's going to be really hard to avoid spoilers. Like, it's one thing if you're a nerd and you haven't seen it on opening day. Okay, maybe you had, maybe your grandma died. Okay, whatever. There are things that could happen. But if by the third day after release you haven't seen it...
You know, I hadn't seen it until Christmas, and I avoided spoilers.
There was a huge conspiracy on all nerds around the world, nerds and non-nerds, together to keep spoilers from the general public, I think.
I believe there was a guy who got the crap beaten out of him in a theater, too. That was... Yeah.
All right, so life in the verse. Aside from Star Wars, what have you been doing recently, Gray?
Some Heroes of the Storm. Still enjoying that. They put out some new Dryad character, which I greatly enjoy killing. World of Warships, just a little bit of that again. Still frustrating. Still has its problems with grindiness. Still entertaining occasionally when you want to blow a few minutes. And then a whole bunch of flight testing in 2.0 and 2.1, which has been a blast.
I saw somebody post on Reddit. So. They said, 3 hours and no crash. Where's my award?
They had completed all the missions. They had cleared out the mission log.
Yeah, that was very impressive. World first, completed all missions without crashing. So that, I mean, it's looking really, really impressive. What I have been up to recently
still has its crashes, but it's pretty good.
Yeah, and you know they're taking a break for Christmas, as everybody usually is, or the holidays as one might say, and so we'll catch up more of course in January and February. I mean, now that this big first step is in place, it's just fine-tuning on the flight model, and it's adding of new things here and there, and so then they're going to add, they're going to add this, they're going to add that, and it's going to start looking more and more every day like the game that we backed and the game that they've been talking about, but that we haven't really had yet. Arena Commander is great and all, but that's obviously not what most of us signed up for. And next year, just a few days away, is the year of Squadron 42, Gray.
So soon. I feel confident seeing the stuff with the Starfarer in that preview, the holiday live stream when they walked us through the whole thing. They can get Squadron 42 ready for us this year.
Yeah, I mean it's a much more controlled environment, isn't it? Than the open world MMO aspect of it. I mean, MMOs take 5 or 6 years to build for a reason. And single player games can be turned around in a year if you look at what Call of Duty's doing.
And right now, we're doing a job of debugging all their collisions for them.
Yeah.
So, not too bad.
Not too bad. All right, so...
That Starfarer, that was pretty.
Yeah,
that was really, really
I was
pretty.
Actually looking at the Javelin blockout that they showed during the live stream. That was also really cool looking. I mean, the fact that they actually made the inside of the ship match the outside of the ship was really impressive. There's so many games where you just see a ship from afar and then you're in the inside, and if you kind of map it out in your head and you go, man, this wouldn't fit in the thing that they just showed me from the outside, because they're like, single player games, and it's just like first and third person animations in other games. It's like the cheap and easy way out, and here they're like, no, we're just going to put this thing inside this other thing, and it's going to fit correctly. And that's why they had to double and then triple the size of the what's it call it, the Corvette turned destroyer, the Idris.
Not a destroyer, it was a Corvette turned frigate, I think.
Oh, did it go frigate? Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry.
Frigate turned,
you're right.
Yeah.
The Javelin is the destroyer.
Yeah.
There's so many now. I need to go brush up on my ship trivia for the next time we go to the Star Citizen bar. In other news, I did get.
Does that exist?
No, there's no such thing. Oh. I did get tickets for PAX East, and I was very excited by that. Did I tell? I don't remember if I told this story on air. I had set up a Twitter notification so that, specifically using a sound on my phone that my phone never ever makes. So when the official PAX Twitter makes any kind of tweets, it would make this weird noise that I never hear, so that I don't just ignore it. And I knew that it was like around this time of year, like about 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, when the PAX East tickets actually opened up. I knew it was around this time of year that PAX East, so I'm just listening. Every time my phone makes a sound, I'm like, oh, nope, that's just text message. Oh, that's just, email. And then I'm helping my coworker set up some stuff in one of the rooms, and suddenly my phone makes this sound that he's never heard before. And I drop what I'm doing, literally, I had two pieces of this thing in my hand, and I just dropped them on the ground and just scrambled to get my phone out of my pocket. And I looked at it and I said, "It's happening!" And I booked out of the room to the nearest computer. And only afterwards did it occur to me what that must have looked like to the other people in the room, of which there was only one. But if there were more people, it would have been the first thing to come to mind would have been like, oh, he must be having a child. His wife must have just gone into labor. Nope. Nope.
No. Also, not some sort of terrible attack. You just happen to need PAX tickets.
Yeah, and I got them, just barely. They sold out minutes after I got mine. And I got mine I was at the computer 30 seconds later, and I got in the virtual line. Anyway, so I'm hoping there's going to be some awesome reveal at PAX East this year, which is in April, which is great because the last couple of years they've been in March, and it's always been a little bit on the chilly side. So maybe a couple more weeks into April would help. All right.
I remember walking around Boston and being like, "This is kind of miserable."
Oh yeah. I mean, it's no Texas in the summer, but it's still miserable in a different way. Anyway, the other thing that I've been doing recently is playing Civ 5 with the Community Patch Project mod. I thought I'd never go back to Civ 5. I had 767 something hours into it, and then
played about 2 games.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. No, not quite. I think each game is probably around. Well, I mean, depends on how fast the speed that you go and whether you go to the end or not. Most of my Civ games ended when I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm going to win, and I don't feel like playing the last 100 turns and just hitting enter again and again because I've already basically surpassed everybody and there's no chance that they can catch up. So I had basically gotten to the point where the only way to give me a challenge was to just have the AI cheat like crazy.
Oh, yeah, they start off with a ton of resources and extra buildings and all that.
Oh, yeah,
kind of crap.
The base game, when you try to play at the harder difficulty modes, they'll just start with literally an army, and that'll walk over to your first city. If you start next to one of the aggressive civilizations, like the Attila, or if you start next to Montezuma or whatever, Gandhi. If you start next to one of the military civs, they'll just come over to you with 5 units while you're still building your very first unit. Literally, within the first 10 turns before you can build a second unit, they're on your capital, so you just lose. Okay, well, dang, guess I'll restart and try again. But I decided to try the Civilization Patch Project again, which is a continuation of the spirit of another mod called the Communitas mod. And wow, they have done some vast improvements in the AI, but more importantly, they've changed the game systems to make them more AI friendly. That's the thing that makes one of the things that makes the AI much smarter is because they've added systems that are more easy for an AI to evaluate. I mean, the thing about it's
a lot easier to say if-then statements and start to predict action.
Yeah, because the old promotion system, when a unit leveled up, it would usually choose between one of two promotions. Either you get a promotion for being in flat territory, flat ground, or a promotion for being in hilly/wooded terrain, like rough terrain versus open terrain promotions. And the AI had a real big problem with that because it wasn't great at moving its army units in a predictive way, like it wasn't planning 3 turns ahead. And so, a human player can use those promotions really well. They can say, well, I'm going to move these units onto this flank because it's very open, and these units onto this flank with the rough terrain is. But the AI had a real problem with that. So it just changed it and said, okay, the 2 options that you get instead are, is it going to be better attacking against cities, or is it better attacking against units and flanking? And the AI can know, like, move this up against enemy units and to get a flanking bonus, or move this up against cities to get a city bonus. It can figure that part out. So that's just an example
It'll
of the...
pick which armies it should send where, or just slightly better.
Exactly. It knows I'm going in this direction because there's a city over here. I'm going in this direction because there's units over here. So that's better than trying to read terrain that changes from turn to turn, because when you move somewhere, now the next piece of terrain is different. So anyway, that's just an example of the kind of thing that they managed to tweak in the AI, and they do that in a lot of different ways. To give you an example of how hard this game has been, I conquered one enemy capital. Moscow was sitting on a really prime real estate location. I conquered Moscow, and from then on, it was like Brazil and Siam and the Netherlands had this hard-on to destroy me. I formed like the triumvirate of enemies that just were like, how dare you hurt our friend Russia? And like for the rest of the game wouldn't do any trading with me or anything. And then they all declared war at me at the same time. And it was a good thing because I was doing really well and I was getting bored. Like, okay, if they're just going to let me expand till I just, I wasn't even fighting anybody. I was just taking over huge swaths of terrain. And I was like, that was actually a fantastic time for them to declare war because I had not ever really expanded my military. And I had some very vulnerable cities on the coast and they had much more strong naval technology. I'm like, shit, they're playing like a player now. What is this? Then after that war, I did wind up winning it, but it was a hard run thing, and I had to like switch all of my cities over to war production and stop trying to get forward in certain technologies. So I basically had to set myself back on a bunch of things in order to win the war. And I did wind up taking 1 or 2 of the Netherlands cities. And they're like, well, if war doesn't work, we'll just sanction you to death. So they used the World Congress to turn off my ability to trade with. They sanctioned the city-states, so I couldn't trade with city-states. And then they sanctioned me, and suddenly my economy is in the toilet because I can't make any money trading with these other powers. And I'm like, holy crap, that was really clever. Like, that actually is going to cause me to completely change my strategy. I have to find a new way to make money that doesn't involve trading. And it's I haven't finished that game yet. It's still very touch and go whether I'm going to win. I really like it. And I'm not playing on a super hard difficulty. I'm playing on like a regular, like King. It's like just over the normal difficulty a little bit. Wow. Okay. Anyway, I gushed a little bit too much, but I really like that mod. There's a link in the show notes. But let's get on back to Star Citizen stuff. I started talking about the wrong thing. So we were watching the holiday live stream recently. I think you watched the whole thing. I watched the pieces of it that they put up on YouTube. And even though the whole thing is on YouTube, I didn't get a chance to watch the whole thing.
It's also all up on Twitch. It was up the moment they turned off the camera, which is how I ended up watching it.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Twitch says saves the whole past broadcast the moment that you end your broadcast.
Yeah.
So it gave me the ability to say, hey, I showed up for the last 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. Okay, now I'll go watch the rest. And that was... So I caught the last 15 minutes and I got the rest of it.
Yeah. So I was very impressed. The one that I think impressed people the most, if I read it correctly, is the From Pupil to Planet video, which just is like...
gorgeous.
And you know what I was thinking when I was watching this? This is all the more sweet when I think about people like Derek Smart watching this.
Oh, he who shall not be named.
Yeah.
Just call him Voldemort.
Voldemort. Just okay, there you go. The Voldemort DS. Just imagine people like him and all the other people that have written just like total trash pieces about how Star Citizen is never going to get anywhere and it's vaporware and blah blah blah. And then just looking at this and being like, wow. So I thought No Man's Sky was really impressive a long time ago, just going from like space to the planet and back and really easily. But those scales were so much smaller. Like those were basically asteroids. They weren't huge planets. And this one is not a huge planet. It's 1,000 kilometers in diameter, which
slightly smaller than Pluto.
There you go. It's a bigger than our moon, I believe, though. I actually don't remember. But I know that the Earth is 12,000 kilometers in diameter. Put that in. It's approximately to put that in.
The moon is 1,737.
Okay, so this is smaller than the moon.
Than Pluto.
There you go.
It's smaller than the moon.
So it's about 1/12 the size of the Earth, 1/7 the size of Mars, and it's a little bit smaller than the moon. But this isn't necessarily the largest thing they've ever been able to do either. This is like maybe their first test of it. Maybe they can go bigger. And even if they can't, it's a pretty good scale model. 1/12 is a pretty good scale model of like a solar system. If they could do the solar system in 1/12 scale, that's still really good. If you put it, if you ask me.
It's not bad at all. And actually, this is clearly a demo. This is not something that they're going to probably have as their model for a full-size planet.
Oh, sure.
This looks to me like what they would use for Nyx.
Nyx?
You need Nyx, the NYX.
Oh, okay.
That's the next landing zone, and we're going to get to see that on the next Around the Verse, which is pretty cool. They gave us a preview of that this week. But Nyx is it's basically just a planetoid. It's smaller than Pluto. You have a bunch of mining stuff on it type thing. This is the right size for that.
Yep, you're right. It's exactly the right size for it. And the thing they're showing off in this video is you can go from the planet all the way out in real time rendered, and B, the atmospheric scattering works properly at whatever scale you're at, whether you're on the ground looking at the shadows and the lighting, or you're out in space looking at the corona of the planet as you get closer and closer to sort of where the sun ends. And that's super impressive. And just the fact that it's doing it in real time. It might be doing it in real time on a Titan, for all we know, but it's still doing it in real time, and that's really impressive. And
we do have in chat a fellow named Sid Vicious. Nice reference. I don't think you're the real Sid Vicious, but I approve that. That Sean Tracy said he slapped the demo together in a few days. I believe that, actually, given just how easy procedural gen makes putting something like this together, at least for a really basic structure. I'm curious to see procedural gen when they start adding in greenery and water and all
sure,
that
that's way more difficult. They can do a rocky planetoid really easy, of course.
Yeah. Now, the other thing that's kind of cool about this is the atmospherics. This has clearly what's meant to be a small, semi-breathable kind of atmosphere, which on something this size is surprising enough, but still cool for the demo. They've talked about planets that specifically have very thick atmospheres. This gives them the tech to actually do that.
And it'll look and feel different because of the way that they're modeling the refracting of the light.
And they can say, hey, this planet that you're landing on has a poisonous atmosphere, and instead of just having a sensor on your ship going beep, 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 or having to tint everything yellow just by default, which I've seen games do, they can actually have it properly refract, and as you go down deeper, you lose sun, you gain this light change. It'll mean darkness is actually a distinct possibility on some of these planets, which is pretty cool.
Why is there no re-entry turbulence? Because they didn't model it yet. It's still alpha. I do want to see re-entry turbulence. The other thing is this could be, like you said, like a very thin atmosphere.
Yeah.
and a very small atmosphere too. So anyway, I actually, to be honest, I did not expect us to ever, at least not by launch, be able to drive from space down onto a planet. I mean, I was really impressed with No Man's Sky, and I was thinking, okay, well, Star Citizen, they've never said that they were going to try to do that, at least not right away.
They said procedural gen was an eventually thing.
Right, that's what I've always expected. But they're like, oh yeah, here it is, like not even close to being out yet, and we've already got it kind of working like this.
So when I saw Broken Moon for the first time, and that's a partial dome.
Hmm.
It's not a full planet. It's just a, big horizon-sized dome. I had the realization that they would have to do procedural gen sooner rather than later.
Hmm.
Not necessarily to let us land on things, but so that they can make more planet surfaces for us to be able to see.
Yeah, you can only make
Because
so many
trying to
skyboxes
custom,
without copying them over and over again.
that's just it. Trying to custom a whole bunch of planets for even 10 systems, even 10, which would be tiny, would be more time out of their art department than I think they have to spend with most of those people. I I think this procedural gen tech was coming. I'm surprised it was this quick. I was thinking maybe by the end of this year, or next year rather, because they've been talking about using asteroid procedural generation tech when they showed the 2.0 demo. So all of a sudden, if that works, it means all planets become a much easier thing for them to deal with. And making a planetary system that's not occupied becomes very, very easy for them to work with comparatively, which they need to be able to do. There have to be systems in the starting game um, that don't have big colonies, that don't have big cities.
Yeah, otherwise, what's there to explore?
That's exactly it. If everything that they have at the launch of the game is Terra and Earth and maybe Nyx
And Stanton.
and Stanton, where do you go? It doesn't feel like there's too much there. They have to create desolate systems.
Yep.
And even things like Nyx, that whole system is pretty much awful to deal with, aside from Nyx itself, or the moon thing where you land. Regardless, they needed that tech to be able to make larger systems that people could actually fly around. I think this was the right move for them, particularly since Frankfurt. That's what they do. These guys are the big picture CryEngine coders.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty cool stuff. I
Definitely.
am curious to see how much customization goes in. That'll be a fun little. What word am I looking for?
Adventure?
There we go. Fun little adventure. Like, do they have caves? Do they do these specific areas where they're trying to make sure you can find weird things? Are we going to have pieces of that big spaceship whose name I've forgotten that blew up, the colony ship? Are we going to find pieces of that on some planet at the launch of the game?
Mm-hmm.
No,
Artemis,
we don't know.
right? Artemis was
Artemis,
the
there we go.
spaceship, the colony ship.
Yeah, from the story. I feel like they're actually paving the way to say, hey, we'll create a piece of the Artemis on some planet that's actually the size of Earth. Good luck finding it.
Yeah, but when you have 500,000 people out there exploring the galaxy,
It's true.
that seems like it's it's eventually going to happen. And it would be great if that thing was found, like it's been in the game for a year and it's found a year after the game launches. Like that would be really interesting too. I really hope they do that correctly. Any new, like, amazing things, like even story related things, that stuff shouldn't be in the patch notes. That's like a spoiler.
No.
Like any new stuff that gets put in like that should be put in stealth, and then like somebody's gonna find it, and the word spreads via the comm system in the game, and it feels more immersive that way. That's one thing I always hated about like the MMO patch notes are like, oh, it looks like Living Story 2 has started. There's problems in the blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, well, sure, but isn't there a way I could learn about these things that,
MMO Champion, where everybody just data mines the files for every
yeah.
new piece of gear, every mount, every enemy,
Mhm.
every time Blizzard posts a patch. CIG
Yeah.
is going to have to lock their files up tight to prevent people from finding
Oh, that's true.
some
You're
of those
right.
assets.
Anytime they want to put in a new experience as far as an exploration quest or event or chain or whatever, they have to try and hide there. Like if they want you to find a, torn apart javelin somewhere and it's something that they hadn't put in before, it's a new type of thing to find. If that's in the code, like they have to bury, they have to lock it up, like you said. It has to be encrypted in a way that people can't just find it. And didn't they do that recently with most of the stuff, and people got pissed because they couldn't data mine it anymore?
That was actually more than a year ago. Actually, I think that was when Anything FPS stopped doing their videos
Hmm.
because CIG was not providing the mod support that they wanted to show off all the files and had locked everything down tight.
Yeah. Now, moving on. There the other pieces of the live stream that I thought were really cool. I watched the behind the scenes video with John Rhys Davies, and that was really interesting. I watched the same one, and I watched the main interview too with Mark Hamill, and I'm just thinking to myself because I'm like, this is such a weird project to try to explain to someone. Like, how do you get like a big name actor to sign on to this thing and not have to be like justifying it all the time? Like, listen, I know it seems weird to have this thing on your, but trust me, just trust me, it's gonna be awesome. Like, I try to figure that out, and it turns out that I guess Chris and John and Mark, kind of stayed friends, or at least stayed in contact to some degree after the Wing Commander series. So that's one of the ways that he was just able to get these, this is Gimli we're talking about here. I mean, Mark Hamill is huge, but he already worked with Chris, and I guess John must have worked with Chris on the Wing Commanders too. I didn't remember that, but it made reference to it in the interview. And I guess that's how you do it. I mean, you get people who are already sold on the idea. And John Rhys Davies' motivation was really interesting. He wanted to get involved in the project because they're using state-of-the-art tech for the motion capture in this game, and he wants to be sort of one of the ones that helps pioneer it. He likes exploring new horizons of that sort. Like, this is the new thing that's going to be used in education and in therapy and lots of other things. Like, imagine if you have the foremost...
And in acting, if
and
they
in
want to
acting, of
continue
course.
to do their jobs.
Right, but he's talking about the other possible ways that this could be used. I mean, imagine the ways that this motion capture could be used to study any kind of degenerative muscle diseases. You could determine how far along somebody was, maybe with a camera. Maybe in the future we won't need all these dots everywhere. You just have somebody put on a suit that has the dots like printed on it, and you can diagnose a kind of muscle disorder based on how they move with this camera. That's a really interesting application of these kinds of things, outside of the let's play video games that look awesome, guys. I'm just trying to think of like more legitimate reasons, and he's talking about these things that I haven't thought about before. That's really cool.
Yeah, it is really neat, and it's good to see that sort of connection is being made by people in this technology that quickly. Not just folks who are writing theoretical papers, but people who are actually using it are saying, hey, I want this to get more prominence, more vision. Let me talk about it for you.
So what was your outside of those are my kind of highlights for the live stream. Did you have any others that you thought were really interesting to see?
The Starfarer, I just have to keep harping on it.
That was in the ship pipeline discussion, right?
It was. It really, really is a cool looking ship. And when they showed how they reused textures and they reused materials and they reused elements like the chairs for the Reliant, which, by the way, really cool looking little ship, and all of its variants. That was really good to see that it's working. One of the things that they had advertised a while back was that they wanted to try to get ships coming out quicker, specifically by reusing materials, reusing pallets, reusing elements, and to see how quickly they were able to hash out the inside of the Reliant and say, hey, look, we can just reuse all these elements and it's pretty much done in here. That's really cool. And then tacking on the fact that you have the Freelancer all redone and pretty, and you have the Starfarer with just a couple of hallways left, really. That's pretty neat. I think we're in for a lot more ships getting hangar ready quickly in the next year.
Yep.
Oh,
definitely.
And the every month patch thing. Did we mention that?
No, I don't think so.
So CIG, for those of you who hadn't read or heard, outright said that they're moving from a feature style patching to a time associated patching. So every month their goal is to put out one big patch that goes through the PTU, gets tested, and goes live.
Okay.
If features aren't ready, they will remove those elements.
Makes sense.
And just be like, okay, we're done.
Well, it's going to be a lot easier to do things like that because they're working on fewer branches now. Part of the thing of getting to where we are right now was taking the different branches of the game. For those of you not in game or any kind of programming design, branches are like pieces of the code base that have been split off and worked on separately. And for a long time, you had like this entire separate branch that they have been working on that looks and feels very different to the one that we were playing in the Arena Commander. And they've finally sort of unified that branch plus the one that Squadron 42 has been based on, and now everything is working off the same main code base. So when they make changes to it, they're reflected everywhere, both in the PTU when those patches come out, and when Squadron 42 compiles their new things for when they're testing their single player experience. It's all cohesive now. So that should make their main progress faster now that they've been able to do that. I mean, up until this point, though, it did make sense to do that because the way they wanted to get Arena Commander out before properly finishing it, they can't make the changes and the iterative design that they want to that without woefully hurting the experience of players.
And part of the problem they were running into with their patch design was when they were working on a big branch like what happened with Star Marine, if the feature wasn't done, the patch didn't come out.
Yeah.
We got nothing. And I think CIG realized that over the summer, there was a lot of frustration in the community about where is this thing we were promised? Where is this whole set of patches? Where's anything coming out of development? And really, we didn't get a whole lot because it was, in fact, in development. When they finally did the code merge and they said, okay, screw it, we're going to make sure everything's in 64-bit. We're going to make sure that we can start putting the persistent universe, mini PU together. And we'll have some FPS elements in that. So they merged in the working FPS animations, which they had to take out of the whole Star Marine patch and work through all that crap. Now we're in a position where the mini PU actually provides a reasonable test bed, and changes that they make can be done on that. At this point, code merges, which are hell, can be a little more infrequent and a little less painful, at least so far as putting big new features is concerned.
Yep, I'm very excited to see things sort of speed up a little bit now that they've got the big blockers, right? These are the design blockers. So like we think we know how we're going to make the flight model, but until you actually do it and then play around with it, you can't decide whether that's going to be the best way or not. Now that they've had that opportunity and they've gone back and reiterated on that and added the jerk and the features that we talked about in the big news roundup, those things now give them a lot more dials to play with to make it feel the way they want it to feel. So we're at a less like coding literally the thing that's going to make it work, and now we're at the tweaking stage for the flight model, and that's going to make everything feel like it's coming much faster. So I'm very excited about that.
Yes.
All right. Any other final comments about the live stream? Anything that you think we might have missed?
$100 million?
Oh, yeah, that's right. 100 million since the last show. Oh, that was exciting. That was exciting.
That's impressive. That's a big number to hit.
It's at 103 now. It's at
103.
Yeah. I saw it.
Well, you had the holiday sale, and you have the ongoing end of year sale right now with get your crap before the EU exchange rates change on the website.
The people in the YouTube chat are arguing over whether the HoloLens or the Oculus is going to blow everything away. I think they're two really different applications, though. The Oculus is going to be a full VR. The HoloLens is designed specifically to be an augmented reality, as far as at least the marketing that I've seen for it.
Yeah, I'm not sure how the HoloLens is going to act initially as a gaming peripheral. That it's a really interesting question about how they'll actually be able to handle full over face sorts of things like you get with Oculus. But I think there's potential for it to be able to do the same thing as Oculus when you get to a point where that's useful. I mean, maybe they'll never do that. Maybe they'll just say, hey, you still have to have a big monitor, but we can add all these buttons sitting in front of you that you can press and they'll do things, and who knows. Of course, then there's no feedback, so you got that question about how tactile do you need to have gaming surfaces.
Yeah, that's I mean, to the point where the HoloLens kind of shows off how you can interact with it without touching anything really. Is it going to get to the point where you can just have a fake control console in front of you that doesn't even need to do anything except look cool, and like you press a big red button and the thing will detect that which button that you pressed. That would be I don't know. I don't think that could work. I'm just thinking to myself and going through it. I don't think it would work. Okay, anyway.
We'll see. I still want a HoloLens really bad.
Oh yeah,
but
me
I'm not
too.
sure I specifically want it for gaming.
Yeah, and the other thing is the ways that they've advertised it. They're like, oh yeah, you'll just be walking around your home with this giant visor on your head, and you'll look like not Data, the other guy on Star Trek that I don't know, with the big visor on his head.
Geordi?
Geordi!
Burton?
That's the one. Yeah. I'm not a Star Trek guy, in case you didn't notice. But quiz me on any Babylon 5 trivia, and I'll back you up. Okay. Anyway, so yeah, I just imagine like Geordi's walking around like all over the place in society, and it just doesn't add up to me. If augmented reality is going to arrive, it's going to arrive in the form of very discrete glasses in the way that Google Glass was trying to make it happen. But Google Glass was obviously a very low amount. You just had this tiny corner in the top right of your vision. Like when it happens, it needs to be, you know, glasses that you wear that don't look overly gaudy and huge like this visor. They have to figure out the miniaturization and make that shrink down so that it's, I mean, if it's in a contact lens, wow, that's where it's really at. But I don't know when or how that is ever going to happen. But that's in every like sci-fi future thing, right? Is your heads-up display is built into the contact lens of your eye.
The big thing that they're doing lately is they're projecting into your eye. They're projecting onto your cornea. Not to derail this conversation too much.
That's right.
But if you have a small thing that
tech
projects onto
too.
the cornea, you end up with a much better overall image. The focus works out better. And then, you know, at that point, you don't have to cover your whole face. You just have whatever
a little
that projector
projector
is
sticking out in front.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or
And that, I
off
mean,
to
that
the
could even
side
be
or
built into
whatever
like
else.
the visor of a baseball cap or something and wear it the right way. I don't know. Anyway,
Maybe.
this isn't. Damn it, chat room. You got us off on a tangent. All right. So this is the point where we are going to talk about Star Wars. But before we go into the spoilery section, let's start with
This
the
will have
non-spoilery
spoilers.
section. Just briefly, thumbs up or thumbs down, Gray?
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
Third favorite Star Wars movie.
Okay. That's
I think
probably...
this was better than Return of the Jedi. That's as far as I can go without spoiling anything.
Okay. I definitely feel that it was way better than all of the prequels, and it was very enjoyable. And now we'll fire off the spoiler music. From this point on, there will be spoilers. You've been warned.
Leave now or forever hold your peace.
Yeah, because, oh my god, Han Solo dies. Like a lot of people saw that coming. But, and to be honest, I feel like they telegraphed it a little bit too much in the movie.
I wasn't surprised.
No.
Actually, it's really telegraphed. Like, even the way they introduce his character, it's telegraphed.
You know what? When he shows up in the movie, he's like that guy that's just 3 days away from retirement in all the buddy cop movies.
That's pretty much it. Yeah.
And you know what? I rewatched Age of Ultron recently, and Joss Whedon always has this great ability to set up a cliche and then pull it out from under your feet. And in Age of Ultron, they did that same thing. Like, Hawkeye is set up as the guy who is going to be retiring soon because he's got this family, and you get attached to his family, and he's going to get out of this thing, but he's still, his wife is supportive of what he's doing, but she wants him to come home safe. And then it makes you look like, and spoilers for Age of Ultron, I guess. But that's been out for a long time. But it makes you think that he's going to die. Everything is telegraphing he's going to die, and it's set up perfectly just like the cliche normally is, and then he doesn't, somebody else does. That was fantastically well done. I feel like they could have done something similar in Star Wars The Force Awakens, or as I like to call it, A New Hope 2, The Awakening. And we can get into that too, but first of all, before we start getting into any criticisms, take our criticisms with a grain of salt, that they are things that we're talking about that took us out of the movie, but that overall the movie was still enjoyable. Because none of these things ruined the movie. They're just little things that I saw that I was like, I wish it wasn't like that. I wish it wasn't like that. But yeah, I kind of feel like they were a little heavy-handed on the foreshadowing for Han dying. Like, they're going to split up. That's like, okay, if you weren't already tipped off, like Harrison Ford in the past has said, like, Han deserves a good death and he shouldn't be in any more movies. He begged George Lucas to get him a good death in Return of the Jedi. And so if you weren't already primed for that, the idea that Harrison Ford is like the highest paid actor in this movie. And if they wanted to carry him over into the next two movies, A, he's pretty old and he might not wind up making it 3 movies from now, 6 years from now. And B, he's paid way too much to get him in the next movie. So if those weren't already meta things outside of the movie that were tipping you off, then they split up. Then he specifically hands Chewie the detonator, a completely unnecessary moment to remind the audience, hey, by the way, if something happens to Han, don't worry. If it all blows up, you know that Chewie still can blow it up. That was unnecessary, though, because Chewie had all the bombs to begin with. If he pulls out a detonator after Han dies and blows it all up, I'm not going to be confused. Because they never established that Han had the detonator in the first place, so there's no reason for them to do that moment, except that I guess it's bracing the audience for his death.
I think so. It was heavy-handed. It really was. The whole Kylo Ren talking to
Snoke.
Her name already?
Oh, Rey.
Huh?
Rey?
To Rey. Thank you. Badass character in like 4 movies, and I can't remember her freaking name. When he was like, "Oh, you see Han as a father figure, you'll be disappointed." I'm like, "Oh, they're gonna kill him." Okay, that's not gonna last long.
Yeah, and there were a lot of great moments. We can sort of go over. I don't know how to structure this. Do you just start at the beginning and just talk about things?
Okay. I have to start. Can I just start off with a technical gripe?
Sure.
Just throw this out there. The TIE fighters. This bothered me. This bothered me on a number of levels. They still have their traditional TIE fighter wings. They have roughly the same TIE fighter size. No major differences seen in the engine or bulk or back. So this is not a TIE Advanced. Let's be clear. This is a TIE fighter.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a TIE fighter that has a pressurized cockpit, which none of the TIE fighters do.
Ooh.
And 2 seats. And 2 seats was used by the early TIE bomber prototypes, which are gone before the second movie even hits, or before Empire Strikes Back hits. There's no purpose for the second seat with a gunner. These are the weirdest freaking TIE fighters I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And I would add no TIE interceptors in the entire thing, which were considered like good Imperial tech. And no TIE defenders, which were shortly after the Battle of Endor all over the freaking place.
Most of those that you're describing, they're like TIE Advanced, TIE Interceptors, and TIE Bombers, I remember from the games more than I remember from the movies. Like, well, I don't remember...
TIE Interceptors were all over the Battle of Endor.
Okay. See, I guess they were sort of an ancillary detail, though. I mean, the only TIE... other than TIE fighters that really jumps to mind when I think of the original trilogy is the one that Darth Vader's piloting is a TIE Advanced in that one,
That's
right?
a TIE Advanced.
So
that's an early prototype of the TIE Advanced.
Every other one that I learned about were from like X-Wing versus TIE Fighter, or the X-Wing or the TIE Fighter games back in the day, or Rogue Squadron. For like the GameCube or whatever it was. Or the
I
N64.
guess this is what bothers me. If you start looking at like the Star Wars lore, TIE Defenders weren't in the first 3 movies because they didn't exist. But by the time Endor came around, TIE Defenders were in production elsewhere.
Now,
these are the coolest freaking looking TIE fighters you will ever see, and they didn't use them.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously that new TIE fighter design was added to the film for the purpose of getting Poe and Finn off of the Death Star, or the Star Destroyer.
Now, the thing is, the TIE Defender has a pressurized cockpit. Some of these ships do.
They could have just reused that. But I guess,
They could have used existing ships, and instead they decided to paint a TIE fighter white and pressurize the cockpit.
So that leads me to the question I wanted to ask you. What do you think was the primary goal they had in mind when making this movie? Because there's obviously a ton of goals. You want to make it appeal to the fans of the original. It's gotta, also be something different, because if it's exactly the same as the old ones, it's going to fall. And if it's too modern, then it's going to be a problem. So what do you think is the main goal? Like, what did J.J. Abrams and the production team say? When we're making this film, we're going to err on the side of X.
I've heard it said that this movie was a love letter to original trilogy fans. And I think that really was the goal. We're going to err on the side of pander. They wanted to make sure that it didn't stray far from the first three movies and the parts that we enjoyed the most. The chase scene going around the desert with the Millennium Falcon flying through the crashed Star Destroyer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, classic, Empire Strikes Back flight scene. It really, follows in that same line as the asteroid field, flying through all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
The fast action, the quick turns, these things are smashing together and it's dangerous flying. They wanted to bring that feel back. Whereas in episodes 1, 2, and 3, I never really got that flow the same way. I think their space fights were meant to resemble more closely the first three movies. And the ground action, as much as there was some outright explanation of certain things like inside the walker, putting marks on the wall, and there's just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of marks on the wall for how long she's been there.
Show, don't tell. Exposition. That is a very good point as to where the prequels fell flat compared to the old movies. It's just good filmmaking, right? It's not even just about making a good Star Wars movie. What this did, it had really, really competent filmmaking. They knew how to tell a story visually. I mean, that introduction to Rey, there's no dialogue for like 5 minutes straight, and you're still engrossed in learning about this character.
And you know what she does.
Yeah.
You know what she does. You know at least a bit of who she is without ever having to really say a word. That was really well done.
So, to answer my own question, I think they erred on the side of rebooting. I think this was, in a sense, it was a reboot. It wasn't terribly different from the Star Trek in terms of conceptual. The difference is they didn't go with an alternate timeline. They went and jumped 30 years in the future and said, we're going to do a retelling of the very first Star Wars with some new characters, but it's just this whole thing has just callbacks and callbacks and callbacks, even down to the order in which the scenes are, right? You start on a desert planet with the droid that has the secret plans or the secret map or whatever, and then you have the scrappy, person that's not important in any way, but gets thrown up into this whole thing, and turns out they're actually force sensitive. Like the Rey and Luke connection there is very strong, and yet I liked how different it was. I liked how different it was, even though it was following this same exact pattern. None of the characters were cookie cutter exact. Like, you couldn't go, okay, that's the Han Solo equivalent, and that's the Luke Skywalker equivalent. And I mean, yes, Han Solo took a kind of Obi-Wan type role, right? He's the mentor figure in this, but he isn't anything like Obi-Wan character-wise. No. And even though Rey is like Luke, she's not. She's the Luke Skywalker character in this movie. She isn't like him at all. She's very technical, more so like Chewie than Luke, and she's also sort of emotionally stunted because she's been alone her whole life. Like, he at least had a family that he grew up with his aunt and uncle, quote unquote, and he kind of had a social life. Instead, she's growing up on this planet whose only society is built around, yeah, we came here because there's really good loot to be got for the last 10
Yeah,
years.
you scavenge crap, and in return you get food.
Yeah,
That's it.
her setting is very different, and she is also sort of, even though she's emotionally stunted, she's also very bold and straightforward. Luke had his sort of whininess to him, and she is very much like in command. Like, she knows what she wants to do and when she wants to do it. And I mean, maybe this is a good time to talk about the criticisms that have been thrown at her. People called her a Mary Sue character. For those that don't know, can you explain what a Mary Sue is within the context of storytelling?
I'll be honest, I'd rather not lend credence to that crap. I find the entire criticism to be physically revolting.
I mean, even my wife said she's too powerful. And that seemed weird to me because she's not super powerful.
She's not super powerful. And when you look at the scene with her and Han Solo and what's his name? The stormtrooper guy.
Finn,
thank you. See, terrible names. And you see him, and you see her, and you see Han talking in the Millennium Falcon. He's going, so that stuff about the Force, all those stories, yeah, all of it's true. This, again, shows rather than tells that there are stories floating around that even a person living on a podunk desert planet knows all these crazy things that Force people and Jedis are said to be able to do.
Yep. And that even this point, 30 years later,
people wonder, like, how does she know to do this or this or this? She doesn't. She's trying crap that she heard in stories about Jedis that she was just told are accurate.
Right. And she doesn't get it right the first time either. And people are like, oh, she's an amazing pilot, just like Anakin and Luke. No, she's not. Do you see? I was cringing when she started crashing into the ground like 4 times when trying to take off in the Millennium Falcon. And that is, I mean, yes, she pulled off like one amazing maneuver at the end, but even she was surprised by it, which to me says the Force is helping her out, like you would expect, because that is that is what the Force does. Every amazing pilot in the Star Wars universe that we've known about up until this point is an amazing pilot because the Force, right? Luke is an amazing pilot, Anakin's an amazing pilot, and Han is like the only amazing pilot who isn't amazing because of the Force, but just because he's that damn cool, right? So that to me says she's not a great pilot. The Force helped her out with one phenomenal maneuver, and Finn just managed to take advantage of it at the end. And then they're like, that scene where they're congratulating each other, like, I can't believe it, that was the best flying I've ever seen. And she's like, that was the best shooting I was ever seen. And like, they were just like talking over each other. That's great. They were both surprised they made it out alive. She's not like, it's about right, I'm the best pilot in the world. Like, that to me struck a chord of, she's an amazing mechanic, because she's on a planet filled with junk and her job is to take spaceships apart, and you need to know how they work in order to do that. So her competency, her main competency is mechanical, technical. Yes. And then she might also be a little good at flying because of the Force. And the other things that she does in the movie, she's good at because of the Force, not because she's an amazing superpowered character. Luke was way, way more powerful as a character than she was in terms of just power level of what he could do by the end of the first movie, if you ask me.
Yeah, I think that Luke, he's hearing Ben Kenobi telling him specifically do something by the end of the first movie.
Yeah.
For her, she's having Force-induced hallucinations when she touches a lightsaber.
Yeah, that was interesting. And so why don't we talk about that? Do you think that indicates that she is a Skywalker from some branch of the family?
It's hard to say, isn't it? It feels like that may be the case. And who dropped her off on that planet? Why? So we're saying, reach out, the person's never coming back. Well, why is the person never coming back? Does it mean they're dead?
Yeah, Maz says that, right? She says, something about, I've seen the eyes, and your eyes know the truth. They're never coming back. Like, she recognizes that even Rey knows that they're never coming back, but is holding on to the hope because it's all she has. Like that's what she sees in her eyes, and that I think was an interesting aspect of the character. But I feel like there's a couple different ways they could go with it. Okay, so the lightsaber is calling to her. They sort of make that illusion in the movie. Is it because she's a Skywalker? I don't think it has to be. I don't think it has to be because she's Luke's daughter. I think and I would love to see them just say, no, she's literally just some nobody that is really force sensitive, and the lightsaber is calling out to her because it is the lightsaber of the light side. This is the Force calling out to the next big hero. It called out to Anakin and it called out to Luke, and now it's calling out to her because she is the next one to step forward to fight the darkness. Right? That's the way I see it. And I'd love to see that born out.
I just want to see the next movie now.
Right, and that's how you know it's a good movie. It made you want to see the next one, right?
It was really, really well done. And as much as I appreciate the fact that, they destroyed the super weapon, there's your classic plot for you. That's how the movie ends. Real well developed, guys. Nice star-sucking, it's going to blow up by the end of the movie after blowing up one planet machine.
Yeah. And
at least they kept the main bad guys completely in place. Like the general guy who Darth Whiny hates.
General Hux. You're talking about the most evil of Weasleys, right?
He's still, the evil Weasley. He's still alive. He gets off the planet.
Yeah. And he was a really interesting character. You notice that in the original Star Wars, all of the generals and the admirals and the Grand Moffs are like really old guys. In this movie, all of the officers are really young.
The one that they kept for 2 movies and that had the best effect actually on the plot was Admiral Piet.
Mm-hmm.
He's the guy that got promoted after they came out of hyperspace too quickly over Hoth. Guy gets strangled. Piet takes over. He's there for the entirety of Empire Strikes Back, and he's there for the entirety of Return of the Jedi until somebody rams an A-Wing into his bridge.
Yeah.
That was probably the most compelling Imperial officer character they did, aside from maybe Grand Moff Tarkin. But it sort of feels like a mixture of those two characters. You have the competent military leader, at least mostly, and you have sort of the ruthless guy who's more than willing to tell the Sith to go screw himself. It's a really good character. It's a good bad guy.
Yeah.
Ginger or Red Menace. Yes, thank you, Vel.
I definitely liked General Hux. He definitely seemed like a super zealot of what they're trying to do. Like he genuinely felt like somebody who thought they were doing the right thing, because order is what's necessary in order to make the universe a safe place and keep the peace and blah, blah, blah. And the whatever propaganda he had been spoon-fed, he like drank down like gallons at a time and is now sort of repeating to people he has that big Hitler type speech where he's like, the Republic who deceived us and is secretly blah, 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 blah. Like he seems like he buys into it when you see him in that scene and when you see him in the other scenes. He's trying to be good at what he's doing. And I like that as a character, he doesn't fall flat of, I am evil.
This is opposed to the Supreme Leader, who my wife's main criticism was, he looks like Voldemort.
He looked like Voldemort and Smeagol had a baby, like Gollum. Like this is like the horrible love child.
He is the Voldemort to Kylo Ren's Snape.
Yeah, you're right, absolutely. Oh, somebody just found this. Somebody posted a things we saw today. Emo Kylo Ren is the newest best Star Wars parody Twitter account. Applies black eyeliner. My parents don't understand me and I hate them. Applies black helmet. Force slams bedroom door.
Oh no.
I like this. Anyway, back to the thing. So so we can go on and talk about Kylo Ren too, as when we're talking about bad guys. I think he was an amazing choice. I mean, I'm glad they didn't try to make a new Vader, because how do you live up to Vader? Instead, they made a wannabe Vader, which is a completely different kind of character and interesting in his own right.
Yeah, I think they had to make perfectly sure absolutely sure that they weren't trying to just make a new Vader. Because if they brought in the new Sith Lord and they're just like, okay, this guy's a badass, he kills everybody, he's well respected across the universe, everyone fears him, it's not going to work. You're going to end up with another Darth Maul.
Exactly. And as awesome as Darth Maul was, I wanted to know more about him. They misused Darth Maul. And
but instead, you have this guy who throws a tantrum. Two stormtroopers look at each other, turn around, and walk back down the hallway.
No, one of them, even better, one of them like holds his hand out in front of the other one's like, well, I've seen this before. Let's go that way.
It's like he's seen as an unstable little shit, even by the people who are around him. And he's scary, but he's not the kind of scary he wants to be. That's a pretty cool thing for them to be able to create that balance and have it work, at least to some degree, in this film. Now, I want to see how it carries over. I'm curious to see what he does in the next one, and if they overplay it, it could be unfortunate. But
yeah, well, just like
he has promise.
And this is another point where I think over time people are going to appreciate the parallels between Episode 4 and Episode 7 more, because it sort of rewards rewatching. Because yeah, it's easy to see some of the more obvious parallels. Like at the end, a giant spherical death sphere blows up due to some hotshot pilots going in and hitting its weak spot.
Let's repeat that again, Bridger. A giant spherical death sphere.
Yes. Whatever. Death machine.
Heard it here first, folks.
So, I mean, that is like the most obvious parallel, right? And but then there are slightly more subtle ones, like the having the Rey and Finn watch the killing of the old mentor character and being unable to do anything about it, like watching Ben Kenobi die. Like that was slightly more subtle, but still very obvious. And then you get like really subtle things like Kylo at the beginning of this movie is in a very similar position to the position that Darth Vader is in at the beginning of Star Wars, A New Hope, in that in Empire Strikes Back, he is the Emperor's right-hand man and he gives orders to everyone. But in A New Hope, he isn't in command. He's at that conference table in A New Hope, and Grand Moff Tarkin is the guy that's making final decisions. In this one, in the same way, Kylo Ren is not the number 2 guy. He and this General Hux are kind of like on equal footing. One isn't higher than the other. And you can tell that the officers in the first movie didn't respect Vader yet. And in this movie, they don't respect Kylo. And I think by the next movie, we'll see that he has gone far enough to the dark side and he has become powerful enough. He's got enough training from Snoke, and he has been put in a position of power where everybody respects and fears him now. That parallel is more subtle, but also interesting in how different it is. I love it. I love looking at the differences that are emerging in the parallels and how they're different. I don't know. I think it's really cool now, seeing it the second time.
It is.
So, go ahead.
I am curious to see, they supposedly blew up the Republic planet.
Yeah.
Like where the Senate's at. There was not a whole lot more talk about that for the rest of the movie. If this doesn't feature prominently very, very quickly...
Yeah. They're going to need some flashbacks in the next movie, I think.
They're going to have to do something to make sure that, that matters, rather than it just being, oh yeah, we blew that up. Never mind. Don't care.
So let me get your take on it, because I've actually listened to a lot of different podcasts about this, and everybody seems to basically have the same criticism: is the political situation is confusing. And obviously it's good that we don't have trade negotiations featuring heavily in the crawl, right? But at the same time, when your crawl describes the 3 major players and the actual links between the players of the First Order, the New Republic, and the Resistance is unclear to the vast majority of your audience, something's gone wrong there. I don't think there are enough tools in there to know for sure how that all shakes out. I've sort of inferred my own headcanon, but what do you think is going
on? I'm convinced that Snoke is still simply former Imperial officer.
Okay.
They're an entirely separate thing. They're not part of the Republic. They are sort of doing their own governance. The Republic, if they are truly a benevolent, peaceful government, which they're supposed to be, right? That's the whole shtick.
Mm-hmm.
Would be trying to get Imperial planets to be part of the Republic.
Mm-hmm.
So they would be trying to convince Snoke. They would be talking to Snoke actively behind the scenes, saying, hey, why don't you implement some reforms and bring your whole voting bloc into the Republic? I think they were probably trying to offer some sort of olive branch to bring his stuff in. He's clearly not the entire Imperial fleet. We saw one Star Destroyer in that entire thing. There have to be more out there.
I understand from the books and comic books and other things that there was sort of between the end of Jedi and this movie, like when Jedi ended, the Empire wasn't defeated. The Emperor was killed, but the bureaucracy and the other Grand Moffs and admirals and things, they still wanted to be bigwigs. Somebody else probably claimed the emperorship or the title or whatever, or just split off their own faction and said, this part of the galaxy's mine now. I've got all these Star Destroyers under my command. And so there was a continued battle between the rebellion, which turned into the New Republic at some point.
Clearly is a continued battle.
Well, no, that's the thing. The Battle of Jakku is considered to be the final battle between the rebellion and the Empire. The Empire dies at the Battle of Jakku, and that's why there's so much destruction there, because it was the final destruction of the official Empire fleet. Now, obviously, more of the Empire and the Empire pieces that really believed in the cause still survived, like Snoke, like Hux, and the other parts of that piece. I mean, if this is a galaxy-spanning empire, then yes, it makes sense that at least one Star Destroyer and at least enough people for one planet Starkiller planet base are around from the Empire. That could be like 10% of the Empire's forces could be represented in this movie. But so my interpretation of, okay, the Battle of Jakku happens, the Empire is officially destroyed. The New Republic isn't strong enough to take over the parts of the galaxy that don't want to be part of it, right? So it takes over the part of the galaxy that want to be, all the parts that were part of the rebellion, all the parts that were originally part of the resistance when Order 66 came down and the Republic was turning into the Empire. There was a resistance that turned into rebellion. So that part of the New Republic becomes a New Republic, and the remnants of the Empire that would fight to not be part of the New Republic are what eventually becomes the First Order, and the First Order and the New Republic have a sort of tentative truce. They've basically said, listen, the Battle of Jakku happened, the official Empire is destroyed, we've got this corner over here, you've got that corner over there, let's just stop fighting because the galaxy is in shambles. That makes sense with why General Hux is completely just outraged that the New Republic would be secretly funding a resistance that would be fighting the First Order. I think that is like the official thing, right? Officially, the New Republic has this truce, but they're funding General Organa, Leia, to undermine the First Order until they can get strong enough to tackle them themselves. That's my headcanon until we get more information, maybe in Episode 8.
And clearly, the rebellion remains a single planetary level force.
The resistance. Yeah, it's not very big. They only have like 36 X-wings, and that's it. They don't even have any Y-wings or B-wings for bombing at all. They're like, we need to bomb this thing. Let's bring all the X-wings and just shoot it with our main guns.
We didn't see piles and piles of big fleet ships that you would expect to show up to attack this place.
And they did refer to the fact that the New Republic fleet was destroyed along with, so like, I think all those capital ships, like the Carillion cruisers and things that we see in the original trilogy, those all become the New Republic fleet. And since the Resistance is not officially supposed to be with the New Republic, if they had all these Carillion cruisers and stuff, that would be way too obvious and would break the propaganda that the New Republic is trying to put out.
Yeah. And that makes some sense for them to be, actively supporting this small fleet, and who better to trust than this woman who has clearly proven herself as a good general in the past, with underwhelming forces at her command. It makes some sense what you're saying on that.
So yeah, I kind of was confused by the political situation.
I I think Snoke has to control territory.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the First Order and Snoke together must control some territory.
Cost of putting together a planet-killing planet that sucks down stars has to be, if you'll pardon the pun, astronomical.
Yeah, definitely. So let's go ahead.
He has to control systems. There has to be a dynamic of him and the what do you call them? The Republic having some sort of conflict or some sort of discussion. So that leaves this resistance as a force which has to be specifically militarily targeting him.
Right. And in this case, as soon as they found out Snoke is trying to find Skywalker, their new mission is find Skywalker before Snoke, right? That's kind of the main thing that the whole movie centers around. Yeah.
So when you're looking at this, the only thing you can see this new rebellion as is a guerrilla military force.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have a political goal of restoring the Republic because the Republic already exists.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have the goal of being the biggest fleet because the Republic should have the biggest fleet if the rebellion had actually intended to install a powerful government that could then manage this problem. So they have to be small, or they've betrayed their principles. They have to be detached from the Republic government, or the Republic government couldn't talk to Snoke. So there has to be that back and forth to some degree.
Yep. So let me change gears. What do you think was the best scene in the movie? What sort of 5 or 10 minute block did you like the best?
Oh man, that's rough.
Or what are your top 2? I can tell you.
So
I was a huge fan of the lightsaber fight in the Dark Woods. I thought that was very well executed. Not just because visually it was very impressive and blah blah blah. It's because it's a different lightsaber fight than we're used to, right? The original trilogy, like the fight between Darth Maul and Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, that was impressive for one reason, because it was like these super over the top acrobatic moves and things like this, right? And the music for that obviously was amazing. But this was impressive for a different reason. It makes sense within the context of this movie. And I'm glad that it did, because if this lightsaber fight had been just like those other ones, it would have completely failed, in my opinion. The other lightsaber fight in the prequels were amazing because those were fully trained Jedi against fully trained Sith. This is a barely trained emo kid who wants to be Vader versus somebody brand new to using the Force. And that makes sense that it is as awkward as it looks. And the detail of Kylo punching his wound to hurt himself to amp up his dark side is really cool. Like, I'm not doing well enough. I need to feel more pain so that I can get darker. Like, that is a super cool detail that it didn't occur to me until the second watch. Like, I saw him do that, but I thought they were like just trying to draw attention to the fact that he had a wound and maybe he was hitting it because he was trying to make it feel better. No, he was trying to make it worse so that he could get more power from the dark side, because pain leads to anger, and anger leads to hate, and hate leads to the suffering in the dark side, etc. So I love that whole sequence, especially because the way that Finn uses a lightsaber is very different than what you'd expect. He uses it more like a longsword, or a baseball bat.
When Finn was fighting the stormtrooper who has the anti-lightsaber thing.
I think that's like a vibro axe, if I'm not mistaken.
That was pretty cool.
It was.
It's like, traitor! We are sending people out as the First Order who are prepared to deal with somebody with a lightsaber.
I think that scene was really just there to establish that, yes, it makes sense that Finn would be able to fight at least fairly competently with a lightsaber because he has had training in melee weapon combat. Here, see, look, other stormtroopers also get this training. Like that's what I gather that scene was establishing.
So I have to say I still loved the Millennium Falcon scene.
Mm-hmm.
Start to finish.
When they call it garbage.
Scoop.
Yeah. That was a great spot. Everybody else always talks about like their favorite thing was the reveal when BB-8 does the little lighter thumbs up. But I have to say, the moment when I was like in the movie and I stopped thinking about was it going to be a good movie and I just had the biggest stupid grin on my face was when they're like, we've got to get to that quad jumper. What about that one? That one's a piece of garbage. And then that one'll do. And they pan over and it's the Millennium Falcon. Like at that moment, I'm like, oh snap, you did not just call the Millennium Falcon garbage. And I had this stupid grin on my face for the entire rest of that scene that had to do, even from the point when Harrison Ford came in and they're getting chased around by those stupid monsters. I loved it. I was sold there. And the fact that he double-crossed two different loan sharks and then tried to talk his way out of it like he always does, and the other group shows up and says, we've already spoken to each other. You can't bullshit us this time. That was great. I love it.
That scene and the scene near the beginning with the landing craft, that was really exceptionally well done, in my opinion.
The opening scene where the stormtroopers come out and the battle that ensues on the planet.
And you're inside the landing craft, seeing like all these people lined up and ready to go. And it opens up, and it's actually, for the first time in Star Wars history, aside from the prequels, which don't count in this case, competent stormtroopers.
Yes! They can hit. So this finally, we have, what's his name? Obi-Wan's saying, only stormtroopers could be this accurate. It finally makes sense.
For the first time.
Yeah, for the first time. 30 years later. And they're not really stormtroopers anymore. They're like brainwashed troopers instead of clone troopers now.
Yeah.
And that makes it
regardless, you have the ability to see for the first time these landing crafts come in and present like this is why people are threatened by the Imperials. The stormtroopers didn't really outnumber the townspeople at first.
Nope.
But they were better armed, they were better controlled, and it felt like a legitimate battle scene on the ground. And Hoth felt just like the Imperials were stomping in and they were going to win regardless. There was no...
Well, I think it was supposed to sound desperate because it was, right?
But in that case, it was like, oh, here's the big guns. You got the big walkers coming in. That's it. This was just stormtroopers coming in and being stormtroopers, and that was pretty cool to see.
And they were smart and competent, too. Two of them noticed the X-Wing, and they stop it from getting away. Mm-hmm. Bam. Done.
Like, hey, you got to help me with this thing.
And that's another great moment. I love when Kylo taunts Poe, when he like goes into his head and he's like, oh, I didn't know we had the best pilot in the Resistance on board. I love that. Oh, and I don't know if you noticed this. When he is trying to get inside Rey's head, he says that she dreams of an ocean with an island on it. And then the final scene is an ocean with an island on it. That
it's the Force.
Yeah. That didn't come to me until the second watching when I saw him say that. I was like, oh yeah, at the end. Oh man, I had a question I was going to ask, and now it's gone. All right, so favorite...
The X-Wings flying in over the water is pretty cool, too.
The X-Wing,
really
man, cool yeah. And Maz is... what's Maz something? The alien lady with the big eyes. Her whole...
The Yoda.
The Yoda of this movie. And the whole cantina scene was really cool, too, especially upon entering. They're like, by the way, don't stare. At what? Any of it. That was great too. And then the camera then pans through and says, look at all this stuff you'd want to stare at right here. That's great. Anyway.
Yes.
I liked those. I liked so much of it.
Regardless, I would venture to say I liked it better than Return of the Jedi. I actually did. As much as I enjoyed the original trilogy, I felt like Jedi's pacing was just enough off to lose me a couple of times.
Yeah.
This one didn't do that.
Yeah, the pacing in this was
a
excellent.
really nice job.
A lot of people that I've heard talk about this say that the biggest botched moment is the final scene with Luke. And I feel like they're probably right, especially because if you watch it the second time, that is way too long. Like, it's clearly there to build up the tension of will we see Luke Skywalker or not for those who don't know what's coming. But then upon second watching, like when they do the release to DVD or official download or whatever, they should recut that ending and just cut literally half of the time down. And to be honest, I feel like that would have been a better ending instead of showing her landing and walking and holding the lightsaber out and cutting to him and cutting back to her and cutting back to him and making him look all intense like he had constipation and cutting back to her and then cutting back to him and then going to the helicopter shot. Like, that ending is so much more powerful if you see the Millennium Falcon entering the atmosphere and hovering over the island, and then you cut to the figure from behind, showing the Millennium Falcon coming in and landing nearby, and then the camera pans around and you see Luke's face, and then the screen goes blank and then music starts playing. That's where it ends. So that is way better than just showing them sitting there like staring at each other for 30 seconds. And I don't know. It felt really weird to me the first time, and the second time was even worse because it felt like the movie should have already ended.
Yeah, it went a while. I don't know. Again, now I said that the extreme they would aim toward is pander.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's exactly what that was, right? Yeah.
That's exactly what that was.
Yeah, like when the chessboard turns on. Like, we needed to be reminded about the chessboard. Anybody who knew anything about this movie going in is going to remember the chessboard upon seeing it. You don't have to turn it on to remind us. That felt like pandering too. Yeah. Although the use of C-3PO was exquisite. He's used one time basically, and it's to cockblock Han again. As he's trying to have this emotional moment with his estranged wife, C-3PO's head pops in the frame and says, "Master Solo, you may not recognize me. I am C-3PO. This is my red arm." I'm just like, that is just the perfect use of C-3PO, which is something...
Hey, Bridger?
Yeah.
Can you change the name of the stream as we have it right now?
Yes. To Twitch, you mean?
No, YouTube.
I cannot.
Could you put, like, spoiler alert in the first two words or something? People are
maybe I can.
Apparently coming in. We don't want to ruin them. We don't want to ruin this for them.
All right, I have edited it. I believe if we go to the watch page, it should be there. Yeah, actually, that I hadn't considered people coming in halfway through. That is scary. Sorry about that, guys. I should have considered that. But anyway,
I've been trying to warn people in chat occasionally.
I see that. Yes.
Yeah.
And somebody pointed out the training ball that Finn pulls out when he's looking for bandages for Chewie, and the whole thing with Chewie getting bandaged, like when he's getting bandaged by Finn. And he's just like, and just like slams Finn. And then later on, he's telling the lady about his epic adventure, and he's like, "You must have been so brave." Yeah, there were just so many great pieces of writing that would have fallen flat, except that they were executed fantastically, and the timing was perfect. And that was what made the humor work 90% of the time, was the perfect timing. Yes. If you make that BB-8 thumbs up scene with the lighter just a fraction of a second longer, it doesn't work and it falls flat and it becomes a meme instead of a really perfect moment. But in the theater where I went to, that got a great laugh out of everybody there.
Yep. No, it really did. It was just enough, which was great. That's what you were hoping to see.
I mean, Chris D says it's predictable. I agree with you. I don't think the purpose of this was to make you completely, it's to relaunch the series for a new generation with nods to the old stuff that can be appreciated by people who have seen it before. If the next movie is also like it starts on an ice planet and they have to escape, like then I'm just going to be like, whoa, JJ, you went off the rails. Like that is the wrong thing to do. I don't mind that it's too predictable because of, like I said, I enjoy spotting the differences that are hidden in the parallels, and I think that is something that's really enjoyable. But
Can I, yeah, can I say for our concern of the week here,
okay, concern of the week.
all of the people who are coming out and writing articles for various publications about I didn't see any of the Star Wars movies and then I went to see this. Nobody cares.
Well, no, that's not true. I mean,
It's
I like getting the impression of somebody who
no,
doesn't
nah.
have the baggage.
If it was actually good impressions of like what they felt, I might be more sympathetic. They are writing as if they are Star Wars hipsters who are somehow
Oh.
persecuted rather by those who've seen it before. Somebody saying, "I'm surprised you haven't seen this movie," is not persecution. It's genuine surprise.
Hmm.
And the fact that you decided to go get high and write a bunch of things in a notebook during the movie and then publish them verbatim as if it's clever, nobody cares. I I've seen 5 or 6 headlines, and every time I'm like, I really hope this is somebody who actually hasn't seen the movie and is going to give me a decent review. Every one of them, I'm sure somebody out there has done it right. Every one of them has been somebody who's like, I got totally high, and then I went to see Star Wars because I've never seen a Star Wars movie before, and I'm totally hip because of that. Or
Well, let me
something.
ask you this: do
What?
you think this is a good place for new people to get into the series on? Like, if people who have never
No.
seen it before go see it in the theater, are they going to have a good time?
I think you might have a good time from the angle of it's a fun, fast-paced movie, but you're going to be confused a lot because the characters that are in this movie focally, Solo and what's his bucket, Skywalker and Leia, and it one thing after another. This is not going to be a movie that introduces people properly to those characters, and it was not intended to be.
You're right. It's more of a reminder, right? The
It will
pieces
remind
of
you,
it remind you.
It'll remind you who they were, but you're not going to care so much about Han Solo dying if you don't know who Han Solo is.
You're right. You're right. So I think that definitely answers it. It's more like the Marvel cinematic universe where they've basically gotten to the point where they said, listen, we're not going to hold your hand anymore. Go see the other movies before you see this one, or it's just not going to be enjoyable. And that's where they're at. In order to make these movies not feel like the first 45 minutes catch the audience up with things they didn't see in the previous 3 movies.
The thing is, you can watch the whole beginning of this movie, and not need to have seen any of the previous movies. You're fine. They do a great job of introducing Finn, introducing Rey, and introducing the weird little droid, and showing you why stormtroopers are evil by slaughtering an entire village full of people who they're pissed at. And they do a wonderful job of setting the movie up that way. And then they introduce old characters, and you're screwed.
Yeah, you're right.
And that's where it fell apart for me. If you were someone who hadn't seen it before, you just can't.
I think you're right. I think it still would be an enjoyable experience. I think they introduce Han well enough. You basically see him doing the same old thing he used to do, and he even references like, "What are we gonna do? Talk my way out of it, like I always do." Like, you get a sense of who his character is, even if you don't have the other movies to back it up.
You do.
But I think you're 100% right in that it's not gonna have the same effect. There's so much in this movie that is granted additional gravitas and weight because you know the history of it, which is what I was getting at, where they're not going to hold your hand anymore and explain everything. They're going to have to assume at some point that you've seen these other movies.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be one of those things, maybe people who saw this and said, hey, that was a pretty decent movie, will take the time to go watch the other 3 movies. That'd be great. I think it would be a good potential way to introduce people who don't care about plot. They just want to see action. but you'd have a much better experience if you decided to watch all 3 movies, all the original movies, and then this.
Yeah.
You don't need the prequels. You still need the prequels for crap.
You don't need them. And that's kind of what I always wish they would do is reboot the prequels. Like, go back and rewrite them. Don't use the same exact plot points. You can use a similar plot structure, but don't use the same. And make
sure Jar Jar has his dog creature.
No, you could even cut Jar Jar out of it completely. They don't.
Did you hear about this?
No.
There was supposed to be another even more irritating character that was Jar Jar Binks' pet.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Ugh. Yeah. I mean, somebody else pointed out that if you're in this, I was listening to the Hello Internet podcast where they're talking about this, and I think it was Gray that pointed out that even though this movie at the very, like during that silent intro, there's tons of like alien creatures and things, and that was one of the criticisms of the prequels is George just loves putting tons of aliens everywhere for no apparent reason. Even though the opening scenes, they have tons of these aliens, each of the aliens is there to add something to the scene, not just because it would make sense in the scene, but to add something to it. When you see the first big alien and he's sitting there pulling this massive sled with junk behind it, and in comparison, Rey is pulling her little sled of junk, it's just showing you how small a cog in this junk gathering wheel she is when there's these aliens bringing in way more stuff than she is. And then later on, you see the giant alien that is, for all intents and purposes, only a nose and a butt, like squished together, trying to drink out of the same water as Finn. And the purpose of him in that scene is to just show just how thirsty Finn is, that he'll drink out of this what is obviously disgusting water because he is so thirsty right now. And it also specifically, it kicks him out of the water thing, which is kind of a humorous moment in time for him to see Rey being attacked by those guys, which is also, by the way, he's like runs over there like, I'm gonna go save them. This is one of those Joss Whedon moments where they set up the cliche of he's gonna go and save her, and then it just completely falls apart when by the time he gets there, she's beaten them both off, and he's just like, oh, huh, okay. And then he just stops, and it's BB-8 that draws the attention to him. Instead, he could have walked away and nothing would have happened if not for BB-8 at that moment, who recognized the vest, or the jacket.
And I mean, they've done a wonderful job of setting her character up as the rough and tumble, technically savvy scavenger.
Right.
Who, by the way, is actually Force sensitive. So prepare for all of the fun stuff that goes with that.
Yeah, that's going to be really interesting because the next movie is going to revolve. I mean, at this point, the next movie can certainly have parallels to Empire, but not nearly as many plot-centric parallels. Like, okay, first they start on a desert planet, then they do this, then they fight a big circle thing. Like, but I mean, the parallels to the original is Luke was getting training from Yoda, and obviously Luke is going to be training her. And Kylo is going to be getting trained by Snoke. That may or may not happen entirely off screen. Like, we might just jump into the point where Luke has been training her for months now, and she's ready to go and try to save the universe. We don't. Who knows how they'll start it.
The way Snoke is talking about the final phase of his training sounds outright sinister. I think they're going to show us something of that.
Yeah.
If only to show this is a cruel bastard, because they have to build this guy up as the big bad for his eventual death.
Right, and it's like...
right now, he's just a Voldemort's hologram. That's all we know.
At this point, I think showing that he has twisted Ben Solo into this creature that is much more resemblant of Darth Vader than he is at the beginning of this movie. Like, killing his father was the final test of his worthiness for training, essentially, in Snoke's mind. And now we're going to... I think we could cut forward to, like, Snoke's final test, where he has to go and achieve something completely by himself in the most ruthless manner possible. Like, just like the same opening scene as we saw in this one, except no stormtroopers. Go in there by yourself, tear the village apart, kill and burn anyone who doesn't give you the answers, and then walk out. And that would suitably mark him as a terrifying figure to behold.
Better yet, let's make it a village of sand people.
Yeah. God, no. Don't make any parallels to the other movies, please. I don't want those. All right, so I got one more question for you because we've been going on for forever. What do you think the title has to do with the movie? The Force Awakens. What is that referring? Is it referring to
Remember,
Rey?
the entire plot of why they're looking for Luke is Snoke is convinced that if somebody gets to Luke, he's going to start training a whole new Jedi Order. I think that's basically it. They're like, okay, now the light side is getting Jedis again. There you go. But I think it's also shameless pandering because they're like, oh yeah, look, the movies are coming back. Awakening. Done.
Yeah. Yeah. And
I think it's a little bit of both. But I don't think it has really anything to do with Kylo Ren. I think it's much more about the whole like Luke dynamic thing. Oh, hey, look, we've got this Jedi who wakes up. Now all of a sudden she can figure out how to do these fun Force powers.
oh man, Degaz, that is an amazing theory. In the chat, Degaz thinks that what we didn't see is that Han turns on the lightsaber once he realizes what Ben is trying to do. Ben is trying to get up the nerve to kill Han. Han hits the button himself so that Kylo Ren was not the one that killed him, so that he would have never actually crossed that line. So that would be a really interesting twist. That would be
an
great.
interesting twist.
To
I
where,
hope that's canon.
yeah,
I hope
if they
that's
do have Kylo Ren sort of redeemed, which I'm not convinced they have to do. Like, they don't have to follow the Anakin Skywalker redemption story. But if he is redeemed by the end of the second or third movie, I hope that's the reason. Like, he never actually killed his father, and that is the reason he still has some light side in him. He never completed that test. That would be really interesting.
Yeah, I could see it. That it could also make for some really interesting dynamics with Leia in the later movies, as someone was mentioning. So, we'll see.
All right. Well, thanks, guys, for tuning in. This has been an interesting and enjoyable discussion about Star Wars. And hopefully, let's see, what's the 27th? Not next week, which is the 3rd, but the 10th would be for the next show. We'll probably wind up discussing, finally, the separate law. If there's no major news to talk about, we'll probably do the separate law review, which is
It's a pretty good one, actually.
The in-fiction
gives
story.
It gives you some insight into the advocacy, which
Right.
I think is kind of a neat thing. Yeah.
For those of you that are unaware, we have been sort of going through the official in-fiction stories for Star Citizen when there's not a huge amount of news, because, we're looking into some insight into the Star Wars universe, and they provide probably the best insight that has been put out so far, because it's all written in fiction. So a separate law is the next one that we're going to do. You can find that on the Robert Space Industries website. And
we should have patch discussion for you guys by January 24th, if what CIG is saying holds.
Yep, definitely. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in. And go out and enjoy Star Wars again, why don't you? Make it the super highest growing film of all time forever and all eternity.
$1 billion international.
Yeah. Let's make it grow like we did with Star Citizen, shall we? No, probably not. Have a good one, everybody. Bridger signing off.
Good night.
All right, no major post-show discussion today because we just basically had a giant post-show discussion.
It looks like we didn't spoil it for anybody. At least
hopefully
nobody who yelled at us in chat. That's a good sign.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
all right, I'm hanging up the headphones. Thanks, guys, for watching, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Yeah, have a good night.
Good night.